community engagement here at the Kalamazoo Public Library. Welcome to tonight's author visit with MJ Kuhn. I'm going this way now. Now it's good, okay. So, thanks to all joining us in the audience today, and all of you joining us online. We are streaming this live on Facebook and YouTube. So, again, my name is Kevin King. I don't know why I'm nervous, but this is like the first live author visit we've done in like 2 years. So it's kind of exciting. But I just want to talk a little bit about how we got to this point. There was a virus, no, I'm just kidding. So like I was speaking at a conference about podcasting with some of my colleagues here at the library. And when I was looking through who was going to be there, I noticed MJ. And then I remembered, oh, I saw something about her book. For those of you who don't know, librarians get a really cool advantage over a lot of you. We have access to digital copies of books, advanced copies of books. So I remember seeing this book, and I noticed she was from Michigan. So I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So we have a podcast here at the Kalamazoo Public Library called 5 Author Questions, in which we have authors on and we ask them 5 questions. And they're pretty silly, irreverent, but they're fun. We just want to kind of ask atypical questions to get in the minds of authors. So I cold emailed MJ and asked her to be a guest. It worked out. And it was probably the most fun podcast we've done. And if you haven't listened to the episode, you should, because it's really funny. And I do want to tell you that it's the only episode I had to cut a lot of stuff out of to make it kind of family friendly. So, but if you want the unedited version, just email me. Right? So, love this book. Those who haven't read it, you're in for a treat. I was so excited about when I read the premise. Like, yeah, I'm going to read that book. Excited to talk to her. But I don't want to steal any of her thunder. I just want to welcome her up here and let her start talking about this great book, Among Thieves. So please join me in welcoming MJ Kuhn.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction, Kevin. I appreciate it. And yes, if you want to check out the 5 author questions after dark, you can send him an email. So, hi. I know actually a lot of the people in this room, so it's a lot of friendly faces. There are some new faces here, which is exciting. So my name's MJ, and I'm actually also from Michigan. So I'm an East Sider from the Detroit area, but I did start my college career at Grand Valley State. So I did live over on this side for a little while, and I really like it over here. It's super cute. Honestly, I've never been to the city of Kalamazoo proper before, in downtown before today, and it's like awesome. I'm definitely coming back. So to talk a little bit about Among Thieves. So I started working on Among Thieves on a business trip in 2016. So I was on a plane flying across the country for work, and I was like, I have kind of an idea for a project. And I just kind of started jotting notes down on this little notebook that I had. And after that, I realized this idea is going to be hard for me to write. Like, this is going to stretch my writing ability to the max. So after I kind of had that idea, I spent 6 months researching different things, reading different books. This book is all about thieves, wouldn't you know it? And I'm a pretty law-abiding citizen. So I had to read a lot of books on thieving and highwaymen, outlaws. I read books on historical con men from the real world, just to try to get into the mindset of these characters, so I could try to write them convincingly. And then after I spent those 6 months figuring out what the heck I was going to write, I then wrote it and rewrote it. I got an agent, and we edited it and rewrote it. And long story short, this book that I'm holding in my hand right here that you can buy is draft like 26 of this project. So I hope it's good. So my inspiration for writing Among Thieves, which, if you're not familiar with the concept, it's 6 thieves working together to steal a magical artifact, but every single member of the heist team is secretly plotting their own betrayal. So instead of being kind of all buddy-buddy, let's work together, it's kind of like, let's all stab each other in the back secretly. And I think my inspiration for that was twofold. First, my love of heists. I am a super fan of heist stories. I love all the Ocean's movies and, The Italian Job. I love the Six of Crows books and, The Lies of Locke Lamora, Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. But I also really, this is going to sound weird, I like betrayal in a story, not in real life. But just to me, when I'm reading a book or watching a film, betrayal is such a valuable emotional touchstone for the reader or the viewer that I feel like it's a feeling we can all relate to on a really deep core level to some extent. And so I really wanted to explore the theme of betrayal, and I wanted to write a heist, and I figured, oh my gosh, what a great two things to smash together. If we have a team of rogues who are used to living on the margins and doing whatever they have to survive, maybe they're going to stab each other in the back, and let's see what happens if we do that. So my goals for when you read Among Thieves, for those who haven't read it yet, I have 3 goals for my readers. My first goal is I really want you to get swept up in the world. I want you to experience the world of Timor and feel like, you can really feel it and live in the world. Second, I really want you to feel conflicted about who you want to root for. I hope that you love all my little lovable jerks that I've populated my story world with. And you can't really root for more than one because only one of them's going to win. The rest are going to have to lose. And I kind of want that to be tough for you guys. And the last thing that I really want is for you guys to have fun. I think that, when we hear escapism in fiction, some people kind of, poo-poo on that or whatever. But I think there's nothing wrong with reading a book just to have a grand old time. I really hope that readers just really enjoy and have fun with the book. Speaking of reading for fun, I'm going to read a little tiny passage from Among Thieves, just a few minutes to give you guys a taste. I will give you guys a heads up. There is some strong language in the section. It was difficult to find a section without some strong language, to be honest. So if that's upsetting, you've been forewarned. I'm going to take a little sip of water before I begin. The group of saints drinking in the foyer row house cleared out the instant Clem opened the door. He didn't seem to notice or care, walking past the saints' cook, Rolf, as he grabbed the cups off the table and disappeared into the kitchen. Wait upstairs, Clem said, vanishing down the long front hall without another word. Tristan shot Raya a horrified look, and she grinned, mounting the rickety wooden stairs, winding her way up to Clem's apartment. Raya reached out to open the door, but someone inside beat her to the punch. Well, if it isn't the infamous butcher of Kerouac, grumbled a familiar voice. Raya raised her eyes several inches to meet Nash's gaze. Shouldn't you be out dismembering someone? Shouldn't you be out stealing someone's hard-earned gold? Excuse me, I don't steal gold, Nash said. No, just ships. I haven't stolen a ship in months, she replied. Although there is this beautiful little cog on the southeastern dock, right next to the textile quarter. There it is. Raya mounted the last step, patting Nash on the shoulder. Nash shrugged out of reach. Don't get familiar. Get too close and I might have to show you what these can do. She bared her teeth, showing off her razor-sharp canines. Don't tease me like that. You know you're just my type. Nash rolled her eyes, her brow furrowed as her gaze fell on Tristan. And who the hell are you? That's a damn good question, Raya said, chuckling. What's it going to be today? An ex-pirate? Maybe a gildish merchant's bastard son? Color returned to Tristan's face for the first time since the alley. Today I think I'll be a runaway Borean Medev guard, he said, naming the mysterious fighting force from the northmost kingdom in Timor. What can I say? The celibate life just wasn't for me. That's not what I've heard, Raya joked. Nash chortled and Tristan gave her a sarcastic glare. The truth was, no one really knew where Tristan had come from. Maybe one of his increasingly elaborate lies had been the real story. Maybe not. It didn't really matter anymore. He wore Clem's brand now. It might not be quite as effective as the Adept's blood brands, but it would still give anyone who came across the boy a good idea of where they could sell him back. He wouldn't be leaving Kerouac for a long, long time, that was certain. What are you doing here anyways, Nash asked, looking her up and down suspiciously. Raya scoffed. Don't worry, the snake's all yours. She pulled the battered iron coin from her pocket, flashing its kestrel skull imprint at her in the dim light of the stairwell. Didn't realize you were looking to hire out your dirty work, Nash teased. Raya shot Nash a glare. She wasn't exactly afraid of Clem, but it was just asking for trouble to joke about working for Wyatt Asher under this roof. The Kestrel crowns were the Saints' biggest rivals in the lottery. Where'd you find it? On Ephraim Althea? Nash let out a low whistle. Well, that explains a hell of a lot. I don't know about a lot, but it explains the foxhole for sure. As shoddy as the iron coins looked, the Kestrel crowns didn't hand them out lightly. Each coin won its holder a favor, usually the convenient, untimely death of some rival or enemy, and each one had to be earned by doing the crowns a favor in return, such as orchestrating the downfall of the Saints' most profitable gambling hall. Looks like Asher's going in for the kill, Tristan said. Why now? Don't ask me, Raya said. I don't have to ask you, said Nash. How could I forget? Nash, the infamous smuggler, knows all. Of course I do. Why do you think I'm here? Raya gave her a wink. The usual reason? Oh, fuck off, said Nash. The smuggler had survived Clem longer than most, almost a decade, last Raya had heard. Rumor had it there was a reason for that. Of course, there were worse ways to buy protection in the lottery than sleeping with a syndicate lord, but still, the idea of being in the same room as a naked Callum Clem made her skin crawl. Then again, she had never really seen the appeal of naked men at all. Raya sauntered past Nash into the apartment. She had seen Clem's personal chambers dozens of times over the past year, but they never failed to simultaneously awe and repulse her. However run down the rest of the row house might look, this room left no doubt that the man who lived there was someone of importance, or at least thought he was. Plush rugs nearly as fine as the ones she'd seen inside Prince Ephraim Althea's room covered the floor, and the walls were lined with cherrywood bookshelves that had to be of gildish make. A disgustingly gaudy gold and crystal chandelier hung over the center of the room, casting its yellowish light over the otherwise dim chamber. Raya peered up at it, wondering briefly who lit all those candles every day, and why. One of these days, the whole south row was going to go up in flames because of Clem's obsession with his fucking chandelier. But trying to understand anything Callum Clem did was a recipe for madness. He read like an old poem. Everything could be expected to have three meanings or none at all. The snake swept into the room like a frigid wave. The smell of chamomile flooded Raya's nostrils as Ivan Rezkoy strode in behind him, his shirt half unbuttoned, blonde hair spilling onto his lithe shoulders. If he was surprised to find a whole host of people in Clem's sitting room, he gave no sign of it. Of course, when Ivan wasn't working, his face rarely gave sign of anything at all. Let me see that coin, said Clem. Raya flicked it to him with her thumb. He caught it mid-step without flinching, flipping it over twice in his palm before handing it to Ivan. The Saint's chief forger held the coin up to the light of the chandelier, spinning it back and forth, running his fingers over the rough hammered edges. He held it close to one vivid green eye, inspecting the symbol stamped onto the back. It is genuine. Are you sure? Clem asked. Ivan bristled. It's my job to be sure. Besides, what kind of Dumklav would forge one of these coins? It would be suicide. It would seem that with the harpies in his back pocket, my dear old friend has decided to make a play for the lottery, Clem said. Nash's jaw dropped before she could catch herself. You already knew? For as long as Raya had been in Kerriwick, the harpies had been pretty harmless, dealing mostly in whores and keeping to themselves, but now they'd chosen sides, just in time for the Saints' downfall. That was no coincidence. What had Wyatt Asher promised them? Clem traded his emerald coat for a burgundy dressing gown and settled into one of his chairs, his manicured fingers steepled in thought. His eyes pulsed with intensity, a thinly veiled madness that had caught flame alongside the foxhole and had only grown steadily clearer in the days since. It appears we have cause to remind everyone who rules these docks. Nash stepped past Raya, snagging one of the apples sitting in the bowl on the spindly table beside Clem. She slouched into the chair across from him, biting into the fruit. I'd bet my left tit this means there's a big job in the works. Not many people would be bold enough to invite themselves into Clem's apartment and help themselves to his food without asking, but that was Nash. How astute, Clem said thinly. He crossed to the fire, setting a kettle and staring pensively into the flames. He was silent for so long that Raya assumed they were dismissed, but just as she turned to leave, he spoke again. Everyone get some rest. I'm going to need you all ready at sunrise. Ivan peered out the window, surveying the already brightening sky. Ready for what exactly? Clem removed the kettle from its hook as it started to whistle, then poured a mouthful of steaming water into a comically tiny teacup. To find out what that rat Asher is cooking up with Harlow Finn. Raya nodded. And once we do? Simple. Clem's lips curved into a smile that might have been handsome if it wasn't for the insanity lurking at its edges. He pulled Ephraim Althea's severed finger from his pocket and set it delicately on the table before lifting the teacup to his lips. We ruin them all. So that's a little taste. So I thought maybe at this point, if you guys had any questions, we could do like a little Q&A action.
Any questions? I'll give you the mic to
Hi.
Hi.
What has been your favorite part throughout the entire process, kind of start to finish, if you have one?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and I actually have a fantastic answer for this because the craziest thing happened. So this process has been really long and like really stressful. Like that's just, how debuting is. But on my debut day on the 7th, I decided to just like stop in at a couple bookstores near me. And I went to like a Barnes & Noble a couple cities over. And I walked in and I like looked at my book on the shelf and I like signed the copies they had. And I was so excited. And then of course it's a bookstore, so you can't just leave. And so like we walked around and then of course we found a book we wanted to buy. So we're waiting in line to check out and my husband like elbows me and I'm like, what? And he's like, look. And the guy 2 people ahead of us in line was holding a copy of Among Thieves, like about to buy it from the store. And I about died. And then I was like, went full dork mode and was like, hello, can I personalize your signature for you, sir? But yeah, that was super cool.
So I have one, if there's not a question from the audience, but maybe it'll prime the pump. Can you talk about, when writing this book, a couple times we've talked about how some of your influences are books for teens in writing this, and how that kind of really inspired you, kind of the way books for teens are written nowadays, which we're in the golden era of teen literature right now, so it's really exciting to read a teen book if you haven't. So can you talk about your intention and what you were thinking about as you were kind of trying to balance between full-on adult and then having that teen sensibility in there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's kind of funny because Among Thieves does kind of walk the line between. It is in the adult market and, as you just heard from some of the strong language, I don't know if I'd recommend it to the 12-year-olds in your life. But, I think there are some folks in the young adult market that would enjoy it. And that's definitely intentional on my part. So I love young adult books. I read so many young adult books. And I read a lot of adult books as well. But like you said, we're in a golden age. There are so many wonderful, especially for fantasy, especially if you're looking for like really diverse casts in fantasy and diverse viewpoints in fantasy and science fiction. Young adult really has a lot of great stuff. And I originally began writing young adult fiction. So my first project that I shopped around with my agent was actually a YA fantasy. And it didn't end up getting picked up, and maybe I'll revisit it someday. But so that was the mindset I was coming from when I dove into Among Thieves. I think for me, and there's I'm sure different schools of thought on this, but for me the piece that I tried to take from YA and adapt to a more adult fantasy book was the pacing. I think the pacing in young adult literature is just like it's incredible. It's like the kinds of books that you can sit and just read it in one sitting if you have a day or decide not to sleep. And so that was kind of what I was trying to emulate. And also, I know a lot of adult fantasy books. Like, I love, Way of Kings and, I love Robert Jordan as much as anyone else. But a lot of times those books can feel kind of inaccessible to a newer fantasy reader, someone who's not as steeped in fantasy literature. And I was trying to make this book a little more accessible to someone who maybe hasn't really read a lot of fantasy in the past. So it's not, super twisty, a ton of different, kingdoms and they're all at war. And, there isn't a lot of that. It's kind of a smaller, quieter. We're really focused on just a few characters and their journey through this heist in this magical world. So.
Okay, so I've already read this, but is there going to be a second book? 'Cause I want a second book.
There's going to be a second.
Yes, so I'm hoping so. Presently, I'm only under contract for the one, but I love these characters. I love this world. I definitely left myself a lot of room to grow. And if there, is a market for it, if people enjoy this book, I would adore the opportunity to be able to publish a second book in with my saints, showing the next leg of their journey.
I was just curious, you said there's 6 people to root for. I know I've watched shows or read books before, I get frustrated when the one I choose doesn't win. What do you say to those who get frustrated when they don't pick the winning horse?
Can you repeat the question for the...
Oh, yeah. So the question is, there's 6 people to root for. What do I say to a reader that might have bet on the wrong horse and doesn't, their guy doesn't win in the end. I'm so sorry. I mean, it is what it is. Who's to say anyone wins in the end? Maybe everyone loses. We don't even know. It's all on the edge.
So you said we're holding like the 26th draft, right? Going through the editing process. Debut novel, it's like your baby, okay? So like going into that, like getting rid of like maybe subplots or things like that. Like how was that like?
Yeah, so the question, how was the editing process like? How painful was it, basically, since this is my firstborn book child? I am a firm believer in the old saying of kill your darlings. So it's like an old writing saying for those that may not be familiar, where, if you have like a sentence or a phrase that you just like, oh, I love it so much, maybe that is the wrong hinge for your whole book to be turning on, and you need to be prepared to like scalpel slice that out. It was kind of difficult to do that. I will say there were two things working in my favor. The first is that this is actually the 6th book I've written. The other 5 just failed. So I got really used to the editing process, and I got really used to rejection before I even got here. So that helped me out a lot. The second is that I do a cheat thing that never actually ends up helping me, but it makes me feel warm fuzzies. And it's when I do cut a darling, I paste it somewhere. I have like this like graveyard Word document of just like snippets that I'm never gonna use, but it just makes me feel better about cutting it if it's like, oh, but it's still there. It's over here now though. It helps.
I'm just curious, for your first novel, did you ever find yourself struggling to emulate other authors, or were you focused on finding your own way of telling a story?
That's a good question. So for first novel, did I find myself emulating other authors or, really finding my own voice? I think that might be part of why it took me 6 books to get to this point. I think, if you talk to a lot of authors, it's actually super rare, not impossible. You'll find somewhere it's true, but it's super rare to find an author whose like first traditionally published novel is actually the first book they wrote. And that's because like really, no matter how strong of a writer you are, the first time you try to write a book, like you don't know how to write a book. Like no, you don't know how to write a book until you do it. So yeah, of course, my first, attempt was probably a lot of just like me parroting, I don't know, George R.R. Martin quotes. I'm not sure, but it's, you take what you love. And I think that's part of why I really try super hard to read very diversely. So like I love fantasy, that is the bulk of what I read. But I also, I try to read some contemporary, I read a lot of sci-fi, and then I expose myself to other types of media because I think, when people say, like, what are your influences for Among Thieves, I always, cherry pick a couple options because, there are some things that influence me more than others. But I'm a huge believer that I, as a writer, am influenced by everything I consume. So if I'm just consuming a super narrow subset, if all I'm reading is Sanderson, then, like, I might just spit out Sanderson fan fiction. You know what I mean? But if I'm reading broadly and I'm exposing myself to a ton of different voices, it makes it a little easier for those to all kind of fade into the background so that I can find my own voice when I'm writing, if that makes sense.
Can we go back to world building really quickly? And
Yeah.
kind of touched on it a little bit, but my curiosity is, world building is such a huge part of fantasy writing. And so talk to me about, or tell us about what the joys of world building are and what is the agonizing pain of world building. I've always wanted to ask an author, how painful is it? Like, what's the pain of world building?
Oh, yes. Okay, so the question is the joys and the pains of world building. I will say world building is my favorite thing. If I could just world build and write dialogue and that's all I had to do, your girl would be the happiest writer in the world. But that's unfortunately not how books work. So I would say the joys of world building is almost everything. It's like my fun, creative claymation playtime. It's so much fun. I take a notebook and I just scribble stuff out at the beginning and like there's no wrong answers. I just will write whatever comes into my brain at the beginning because everything is possible. And then like, of course, I find the stuff that's dumb later and I cross it out and I don't use it. But yeah, it's super fun. I think my favorite parts of world building are probably creating the political tensions between kingdoms and creating religions are probably my 2 favorite things. Just because it's so fundamental to how the rest of the world operates, even if, like I know I said, this doesn't have like wars between kingdoms, and it doesn't. But that doesn't mean that, the fact that, the kingdoms of Idale and Gildemar are, on the brink of political tension, that doesn't mean that that doesn't influence things that happen in the story, or at least the way that I feel about it when I'm writing it. Least favorite part of world building? Naming things. I hate naming things. It's so hard. It's so hard. Naming characters is hard enough, but then like every time I'm like, oh no, they need to go to another town. That means I have to name it. It's so tough. So yeah, that's my least favorite part of world building.
Okay, I'm gonna rehash a 5-author question.
Love it.
So it's a little teaser if you haven't read the podcast yet. So we're gonna sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons. Who you picking? Who you rolling with? Class, race, give it to us.
Yes, so we discussed this, and we know I like my rogues. I like my rogues a whole lot. I think they're fun. Again, if you've read the book or even just like read the premise, that should come as no surprise to you. Like those kind of sneaky guys that are, you never quite know what they're up to. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they a little bit of both? The best. I think what we were talking about on the show was like, if you have to pick, who's more interesting? Not like, a more beloved character. Who's more interesting? Luke Skywalker or Han Solo? It's not a hard question. I'm sure some people disagree and will say Luke Skywalker's more interesting. And I respectfully disagree with you. but there's just something great about a charming rogue that I absolutely adore.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask the question that always comes up in author talks. Not how much money you make and what kind of car you drive, which is one of my two favorites.
Answer to that would be sad.
So what are you working on now? What's next? What's coming down the pipe? What we get next from Mallory?
Yeah, so what am I working on now is the question, and the answer is a lot of things. So Among Thieves was actually pushed back a full calendar year because of COVID. So it was done and just like sitting, waiting for the right time to publish for a year. So since I have clinical anxiety and I can't sit still, I had to keep working on stuff. And so I have 3 projects that are currently active right now. One is with beta readers, one is with my agent, and one is in horrible shambles in my inbox. So I have another heisty story is the one that I'm kind of working on right now. The one that's with my agent is another project that is set in the world of Timor. So let's keep our fingers crossed that people like Among Thieves enough to pick it up and motivate my publisher to want to publish that, a continuation of our adventure. And then the third project that's with beta readers is, I say it's like in the vein of Lord of the Rings, not that I am comparing myself to Tolkien, LOL. But because it's a fantasy adventure where we have like big sprawling fantasy world and we have like a group of mismatched creatures and people on a journey across the fantasy world, which has been really fun to work on. It's been difficult to write characters that aren't like insufferable jerks though. It's been a new challenge for me.
So there's no examples in the modern world of insufferable jerks that we can look at?
Not a one.
Not a one. Do you have any questions for the audience?
Oh my gosh.
I threw you a curveball, didn't I?
I know, I was gonna say, I didn't know it was a pop quiz.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I could say, is everyone here, are you guys all from the Kalamazoo area?
I am.
Woo! Nice. I like it. I like your city. It's nice. But yeah, you're not. You're my mom. You came with me.
You're my mom.
Yeah, I drove you here. You did not come
Please,
from.
Mom's here, everybody.
Yes.
Yay.
Woo!
We
Hi,
should
Mom.
thank her for this visit.
Yes, right? I know. Yeah, she's here to make sure I made it here safe. It's good.
Are there any more questions for Mallory? Okay, well, if you have questions you want to ask her, you can ask her during the signing period of the books. I want to say thank you all for coming.
Thank you, guys.
To today's visit. Really appreciate you coming to join us and braving the beautiful day elements that we have today in Michigan. So, thanks a lot, and we'll be signing books up here at this spot right here. So, thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your night. Do you have any closing
Thanks,
words?
guys. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm so excited that there were people here. It's awesome. So, thank you.